Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar. We're going to have a couple more people join us today, and then we'll get started. So welcome to today's DWSRF and Capacity Building and Action webinar. Today's webinar will be focused on the Drinking Water System Partnerships and the DWSRF program. Before we get started on today's webinar, I have a few housekeeping items. First, during this presentation, all attendees will be muted. We hope to have a few minutes at the end of the presentation to answer any questions submitted. So if you have a question during any time throughout the webinar, please type in your question into the panel on the right. We also have provided the slides from today's webinar, which includes the contact information of the presenters in the handouts section of the panel, so you can go ahead and download that for reference later on. So now that I've done the housekeeping items, we are going to start this webinar with a brief overview of the water system partnerships and the DWSRF eligibilities on partnership activities, followed by a presentation on Washington's DWSRF Consolidation Feasibility Study Grant. So with that in mind, I will turn this over to Carla.
Thanks, Allison. Hi, everybody, and welcome. I'm Carla Hagerman, the partnership lead on the Sustainable Systems team here in Office of Water. Before getting into the specifics of the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund partnership eligibilities, I'd like to give a brief overview on what water system partnerships are, why partnerships are beneficial, and how partnerships can be encouraged and supported by the federal and the state agencies. So, what are water system partnerships? Water system partnership is an umbrella term, very broad, used to define any informal or formal relationship or agreement that public water supplies engage in. Partnerships can be as basic as providing aid during a crisis, an example of informal partnership, or as intricate as creating a new entity, like a joint power agency, to manage a group of existing public water supplies. The most successful partnerships are those that benefit all the participating public water supplies by addressing shared challenges or by matching the public water supplies with complementary strengths, or that have the support of the communities involved. For water systems, there are generally 4 different types of partnerships: informal cooperation, contractual assistance, joint powers agency, and ownership transfer. For informal cooperation partnerships, the public water supplies works with other systems, but with no contractual obligations. A few examples are sharing equipment, sharing bulk supply purchase, and mutual aid agreements. A specific example of an informal cooperation would be, say, 35 municipal systems in Massachusetts that join together to purchase laboratory supplies and chemicals in order to save money all around for all of them. Contractual assistant partnerships require a contract, obviously, but contract is under the system's control. Examples are contracting out operation and maintenance activities, outsourcing engineering services, and/or purchasing water. A specific example is a village in Illinois that had insufficient water supply for fire protection, so it contracted all of its public works services to a St. Louis-based environmental management corporation to meet the needs of that village. Joint powers agency partnership is the creation of a new entity by several systems that continue to exist independently, like a regional water system. General examples are sharing system management, sharing operators, sharing source water. A specific example of a joint powers agency is when 11 public water supplies in Texas that faced overpumping of their aquifer were encouraged by the Texas Water Development Board to form a regional water authority to achieve long-term sustainability. Ownership transfer partnership is a takeover by an existing or newly created entity. Examples include acquisition and physical interconnection, acquisition and satellite management, or one system transferring ownership to another to become a larger existing system or a new entity entirely. A specific example is of a town that extended its service and assumed ownership of its neighboring public water supply in order to solve its neighbors' extensive problems, which included poor source groundwater quality, untrained operator, and multiple water line breaks. It should be noted that informal and contractual partnerships can be formed quickly and with relatively low cost, but while joint powers and ownership transfer tend to take time and planning and financing, as the problems tend to be complicated issues of water quality or quantity, infrastructure or treatment projects. However, the more complicated joint powers agency and ownership transfer partnerships are most successful when building upon the trust and cooperation developed through earlier relationships of informal or contractual partnerships. So why are partnerships beneficial? Well, when it comes down to it in a nutshell, human health and safe drinking water. As regulators of the Safe Drinking Water Act, we are charged with protecting human health and ensuring water purveyors provide safe drinking water. EPA's health-based strategic measure is to reduce the number of community water systems with health-based violations by 25% by 2022. And even though public water supplies of all sizes can benefit from partnerships, partnerships are especially helpful to our small public water supplies. 97% of the nation's 145,610 active public water supplies are small, serving 10,000 people or less. Likewise, 97% of the nation's health-based violations occur in these small systems, 69% of those serving 500 people or less. No doubt these statistical trends are mirrored in all of your states and territories also. The sheer number of the water systems is daunting to manage, and the burden of regulation is especially daunting for these small systems. Partnerships provide an effective tool for small systems to bolster their compliance. In order to maintain consistent service at full cost pricing and consistently comply with all federal and state regulations, public water supplies must have technical, managerial, and financial, or TMF capacity. I'm sure this is a familiar looking stool to most of you. It's important to note that the small and mid-sized public water supplies may face unique challenges to provide drinking water that meets our federal and state regulations. These challenges can include undertrained and retention of operators, persistent compliance issues, aging infrastructure, limited resources, economies of scale, and water quality or quantity issues. Resources are available to help build TMF and to build partnerships. And public water supplies can overcome these types of challenges by developing partnerships with other public water supplies. Benefits of partnerships. When a public water supply enters into a partnership, there are immediate and long-term benefits for public water supplies, for the state drinking water programs, and for the customers. Public water supplies that engage in partnerships can experience improved economies of scale, long-term savings, improved customer service, and increased TMF capacity. When public water supplies are able to alleviate their immediate concerns and improve public health protection, they are able to better understand their existing O&M and capital improvement costs in order to plan for future operations. When public water supplies engage in partnerships that are designed to help overcome these specific challenges, the state drinking water program may see enhanced compliance, resource savings, improved customer relations, and potentially reduce the number of regulated systems. Finally, partnerships can help provide drinking water customers with improved water quality and increased reliability of water service. Water system partnerships are meant to be mutually beneficial and win-win situations for all. So, how is EPA encouraging partnerships? There is a wealth of information, tools, and resources about the water system partnerships available from EPA. Please explore our drinking water capacity website, epa.gov/DW capacity, for examples on how to use the partnerships to build water system capacity. I did want to highlight two valuable tools featured on our website. The interactive case study story map allows the users to click on locations throughout the United States to discover stories behind successful water system partnerships. The stories include types of partnerships utilized, the initial problems, the resulting solutions, benefits of partnerships, funding, key players involved, and the lessons learned. There's a short story summary and also an extended long story with more details examined for each featured water system. The map can be used to find out what is going on in other parts of the country and how others have used partnerships to solve water system problems. We are always looking to update the map, so if you have a water system partnership story to share, we would love to hear it. The other tool I wanted to highlight is the Water System Partnership Handbook. It was added to our website in May of 2020 and will have its official rollout webinar later this year. It has an interactive format and is designed for states to use real data in a series of worksheets to help build partnerships. To answer the questions of how do you identify systems that could benefit from partnerships, or how to find systems that share challenges and complementary strengths, and how can you engage a water system in partnership discussions with the best outcome, the EPA had created the Water System Partnership Handbook to help the states identify and work with public water supplies. State programs are in a unique position to work directly with the public water supplies in their states, utilizing existing relationships and data to identify any public water supplies interested in partnership activities. Identifying and assessing public water supplies to encourage the optimal partners and partnership activities can be overwhelming and involves numerous steps and coordination amongst multiple organizations. The Water System Handbook divides these processes into 6 steps. The steps work together to help you identify systems that would benefit from partnerships, consider optional partnerships, consider real-world impacts, select a partnership to move forward with, and finally help implement the partnership. When using this handbook, you and your team will be able to identify partnerships in need, identify public water supply systems in need, determine how partnerships could improve compliance, assess the practicality of identified partnerships and partners, identify project champions and on-ground support, develop a communications plan, and approach public water supplies about partnerships. We encourage you to use the Partnership Handbook and to let us know how it works for you. We look forward to the rollout webinar later this year and in having the time to give a deeper explanation and a detailed walk through the partnership process. I thank you. I thank you for joining me in this part of the discussion, and I hope this introduction clarified the what, whys, and how of water system partnerships and provided a solid prelude to Dallas's presentation on the partnership eligibilities under the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund. My contact information is here if you have any questions, and we hope you'll visit our website, the partnership website, utilize the tools available, and join us for the Rollout Water System Partnership Handbook webinar. Thank you, and enjoy Dallas and Janet's presentations.
Okay, hi everybody. My name is Dallas Shattuck and I work on the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund program at EPA. Today I'm going to give a short overview of the DWSRF program and talk about some of the main components of our program and also talk about the eligibilities under our program related to water system partnerships. So here's my quick overview. So we're going to start with a little bit of information about the 2 main components of our program, the loan fund and the set-asides. And then I will transition into some of the eligibilities related to partnerships under both of those components of our program. So we'll dive right into the overview. So the DWSRF program is a public health protection program. We use drinking water infrastructure financing as our mechanism, but our overall goal is to achieve public health protection. We are a federal state partnership designed to create in every state a perpetual source of drinking water infrastructure financing. The DWSRF is unique in that it has both infrastructure and non-infrastructure components. So the infrastructure component provides access to credit and a permanent source of drinking water infrastructure funding. And this part of the program is what we call the loan fund. And then we also have our non-infrastructure portion that provides support to states and communities, and we call this part of our program the set-asides. So we have 4 different set-asides under our program. I'll start with the administrative set-aside. So this is primarily used for administration of the state DWSRF program. So most easy example is that it pays for staff to run the DWSRF program. We also have our small system technical assistance set-aside, and as the name implies, this set-aside is for technical assistance to small systems, defined as less than 10,000 people. Third, we have our state program management set-aside, and this one can be used for activities like administering the state's public water system supervision program, developing and implementing the state's capacity development and operator certification programs, or administering and providing technical assistance through the state source water protection program. And last but not least, we have the local assistance set-aside, and this one can be used for a variety of activities that are aimed at helping drinking water systems, whether that's helping with their capacity development, doing wellhead protection projects, or a variety of source water protection activities. So you'll notice in the slides that each of the set-asides has a percentage after the name. So that number next to the set-aside just indicates the maximum amount of money that can be taken from the capitalization grant. That is just the amount of money each state DWSRF gets every year from EPA, and I'll talk more about that on the next slide. And this is the maximum amount that the state can hold back or set aside for specific activities. So for example, a state can, set aside or take up to 2% of that capitalization grant amount and use that for small systems technical assistance. Similarly, they can take up to 10% and set that aside for state program management activities. So this is an infographic. It kind of shows the basic framework of our program, our model. So Congress appropriates funding for the DWSRF, and then EPA acts as like a pass-through. So the money comes to EPA. We then divide that money up based on the most recent drinking water infrastructure needs survey. And then once it's divided, we award that divvied up money to the state DWSRF programs as capitalization grants. And then this is the money that states can set aside some of that and use it for their non-infrastructure programs to help drinking water systems or to help run state programs. So after they take their set-asides, states then place the balance of that CAP grant, whatever's left, along with a 20% match of the original CAP grant amount into that dedicated revolving loan fund. So on the graphic, that's that black and blue circular picture in the middle. So this revolving fund provides loans and other authorized assistance to water systems for eligible infrastructure projects. So the money goes out from that fund and it goes to communities for water projects. The communities repay their loans. Those repayments and whatever interest they also had to pay flow back into that revolving fund. And then those repayments and interest will eventually be used again to make additional loans to other drinking water systems around the country. So that's where that revolving nature comes into play. And there are some states who might actually choose to also go to the bond market. They might have a lot of demand for the DWSRF in their state, and they can use the bond market to leverage their funds, which is a way for them to provide more assistance to water systems throughout their state. And this is just important to note that this graphic, it's the basic framework of our program. There are 51 DWSRF programs. The 50 states and Puerto Rico, they all have this basic framework, but they're all unique in their own way. They might operate slightly differently. A lot of states target their funding based on there might be special priorities or issues in their state where they target funding, whether that might be harmful algal blooms or drought or PFAS or nitrates, whatever the case may be. So they all have this same framework, but they are all unique in their own way. Okay, so who is eligible for DWSRF funding? Publicly owned and privately owned community water systems are eligible. These are defined as systems serving at least 15 service connections used by year-round residents or regularly serving at least 25 year-round residents. And these numbers might not be the most updated, but there are approximately 50,000 community water systems around the country. We can also provide funding to nonprofit, non-community water systems. So these include schools, parks, houses of worship. An important note is that in order for a water system to receive DWSRF infrastructure assistance, they have to show that they have technical, managerial, and financial capacity. The only exception is if a water system is lacking capacity in some area, but doing the project will help them gain that capacity, then they can receive assistance. For example, if there's a project or a community that's out of compliance for, let's say, nitrate, if they were coming in and applying for DWSRF assistance to help them drill a new well somewhere where there's not nitrate contamination or implement some sort of nitrate treatment system, that would be eligible. But they wouldn't be eligible if they came in and say, we want to upgrade our water tower. If it's not addressing the nitrates issue, then they would not be eligible. And an important note is that if the system is lacking capacity, the state could potentially use their set-asides to help this system achieve capacity and then be able to come in for a loan in the future. Okay, so that was the 10,000 foot level overview of the DWSRF program. Now I just want to talk a little bit about some of the partnership related eligibilities under the loan fund and the set-asides. So under the loan fund, the infrastructure fund, you could do a purchase of a water system, the outright purchase of a water system and its assets, including any land and the water rights. Eligible is also the interconnection of 2 or more water systems for a variety of reasons. Maybe it's to resolve SIDWA noncompliance. We've seen this a lot. There are maybe a lot of small systems in an area all struggling with an issue, so they decide to come together and form a regional system and put all their resources together so they can better address whatever issue they were all facing, whether it's nitrates, arsenic, whatever the case might be. You could do it to achieve that technical, managerial, and financial capacity in order to avoid noncompliance or prevent it, to reduce the overall per household cost of service, or for drought resiliency. And I will just note that consolidation projects cannot be for growth purposes. Okay, so that was the loan fund. And I have a few slides on some eligibilities for the set-asides, but I do just want to note that these are not all exhaustive. These are just some of the things that we have commonly seen. Partnership activities that are eligible under the set-asides. We most commonly see this with promoting water system partnerships, whether that's managerial and or physical consolidation. So the set-asides, it's most commonly the 2%, the 10%, and the 15%. So that's small systems technical assistance, the state program management, and the local assistance set-asides are the ones most commonly used for partnership activities. So you might be using the set-asides to maybe study consolidation potential. And I think that kind of goes along with what Janet Cherry is going to talk about after I'm finished, and what Washington's doing in their DWSRF program. You could use the set-asides to contract with a technical assistance provider to assist water systems in restructuring, including helping with some water rate studies or helping them implement and figure out shared billing systems, shared operators, or shared chemical delivery. Set-asides can be used to help develop preliminary engineering reports for assessing regionalization between 2 or more systems. You can use the set-asides to assess regional water supplies, to evaluate options for meeting the long-term water supply needs of certain areas in your state. You can use it to develop state guidance on purchase contracts, to conduct a statewide regionalization study. You can use the set-asides for assistance with legal costs. Maybe an example of that is if 2 water systems decide to do a shared billing system or a shared operator, maybe getting that contract written up or that memorandum of understanding or memorandum of agreement. You could use the set-asides for that. And you can also use it to assist with any of the necessary permitting required in partnering 2 systems together. And so with that, I will stop there to give Janet plenty of time for her presentation, and we'll do questions at the end. But if you have questions or you think of things later, my email's right here. I have our DWSRF webpage. All of our information and documents are on there. And then I specifically linked our eligibility handbook, which has a lot of information on our program and a lot of information on what's eligible, not just related to partnerships, but there is more information on partnerships in there, and there are even some examples. So that would be a good resource to look at if you're interested in more information on partnerships. And with that, I will turn it over to Janet Cherry from the Washington DWSRF, who's going to talk about their consolidation feasibility grant program. So thank you, everybody.
Great, thanks so much, Dallas. That was great information. I'm Janet Cherry with the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund Program in the state of Washington. And this afternoon, as Dallas said, I will be talking about our Consolidation Feasibility Study Grant Program that we do offer through our Drinking Water State Revolving Fund Program. We started this program back in 2004 using set-aside funds. It was initially overseen by our regional offices, and then in 2015, it came under the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund Program. It was a very popular program. Unfortunately, in 2017 and 18, we had to suspend this program offering. In 2017, our state legislature did not pass a capital budget, which meant we couldn't put forward our state match to get our capitalization grant. So we didn't have access to set-asides. So this funding program was suspended for a few years. And during that time frame, our stakeholders let us know how important this funding opportunity was for them and asked us to come up with another way to fund the program. So we did. We modified our rules to allow us to use our DWSRF loan origination fee fund, and now our state rules align with the federal rules where you can use your loan origination fee fund for set-aside activities. So starting last year, we were able to offer these consolidation feasibility study grants again, and using the loan origination fee fund. And just to give you some context here in Washington, we have 4,100 regulated public water supplies. So we have a lot of public water supplies in our state. Over half of these are community water systems. And of our community water systems, just under 1,000 community water systems serve a population less than 100 people. With this small amount of customers and ratepayers on a system, when it's time to do infrastructure improvements, it becomes very difficult to find a sustainable funding source to help these small systems with the needed infrastructure improvements. So we do have a lot of demand for this feasibility study funding to look at consolidations. These grants provide a proactive approach for interested water systems and jurisdictions to study a potential consolidation project with little risk. It's grant money, so nobody hopefully is out any money or out financially as they undertake these studies. And a real important part about our program is we don't require the funding recipients to commit to the study outcome. So regardless of what the study outcome says, we don't require that the water systems proceed with the recommendations that are identified through this study. We all recognize it takes a long time for consolidation to happen. A lot needs to happen between the water systems involved. So it just takes time for folks to take time to look at all the information they have and make a really good decision moving forward. These grants were initially $25,000. Our stakeholders started giving us feedback. More money was needed. The easy consolidations were being accomplished, and now we were getting into some more difficult situations. So we increased the maximum award amount to $30,000 in 2016. In 2015, we funded just over $1 million in consolidation studies. It was amazing. We had a lot of demand for this funding, and we also had the incentive to spend down our set-asides. We had some legacy set-aside funding that needed to be spent, so we threw a lot of money at these studies, and they did have a big benefit as a lot of consolidations did occur. So last year, 2019, when we started the program again after a short respite, we offer these applications, or we offer this funding and take applications every August. So last year, we decided to make $150,000 available from our loan origination fee fund. We also had some state funding that was given to us in 2018 to assist with consolidation projects. The intent of the funding was mostly for construction projects, consolidation construction projects, but the funding also could be used in a limited capacity to fund these studies. So we awarded $60,000 in state grant funding. We had a total of 16 applications, and we were able to fund 7. This year, we just ran our cycle last month. Again, we made $150,000 available. We only received 8 applications. I think our water systems are a little preoccupied right now with many efforts with COVID response. So not surprised we only received 8 applications. And we decided we're going to fund all of them. We're going to make $240,000 available because, again, we see so much benefit with these projects being funded. Eligibility for this funding: the applicant must be a not-for-profit community water system, a county with the legal ability to own and operate water systems, a public utility district. We have a lot of PUDs here in the state, or a water district in Washington state. So those are the eligible applicants. Tribal entities are also eligible to apply, provided the project isn't receiving other set-aside funding. The system being consolidated must be a public water system serving fewer than 10,000 people. And here's that last bullet's really important. We do ask that the water systems that are participating in the study provide letters of commitment. We implemented this requirement a few years ago after we awarded funding, prepared funding agreements, sent them out to the jurisdiction that was overseeing the project, and then nothing happened because they had not done a whole lot of outreach to the system they were planning to consolidate. So we do want the systems involved in the project to have some upfront conversations and understand what they're doing with the consolidation feasibility study. Now, again, nobody needs to commit to the outcomes of the study. They just need to commit to participating in the study. So that was a real important improvement we made to this funding opportunity. Eligible activities are public meetings and stakeholder outreach. I can't say enough how important it is for the system being consolidated to understand what the process looks like, what the costs will be, and what the impact to the rates will be. Legal fees are eligible when we're talking about transfer of ownership and transfer of assets. There definitely are attorneys involved drafting and helping execute those agreements. Preliminary engineering and cost development, very important to properly assess the infrastructure of the system being consolidated and what improvements need to occur in order to bring that system up to the standards of the new owner. So a lot of our projects that we fund, this is the main focus, is assessing existing infrastructure and developing cost. Preparing a report. Reports are important, especially when you are having outreach with stakeholders in public meetings. Water system plan updates. Here in Washington, we have a planning requirement of our community water systems, and the planning document that gets produced is what we use here in Drinking Water State Revolving Fund to help assess the technical, managerial, and financial capacity of our systems for a DWSRF loan. We will also pay for connection fees with this grant funding. We won't pay for any construction or ground disturbing activities, but we will pay for the system development fees to do the project. Applications are scored and ranked based on the health with risk being addressed, and this aligns with how we score and rank our construction loan projects. And new this year, we added managerial challenges as a category and a way to score and rank our projects. And the managerial issues we identified were if the system being consolidated could not retain adequate board or council members or adequate staff to operate and maintain the system. To date, we've funded approximately 130 studies. 53 water systems have been eliminated through consolidation and now are part of a larger water system. The grant has paid for connection fees, excluding installation and construction costs for 12 water systems. I have to say this was the quickest and best return on our investment when the system that is in need of being consolidated, usually due to compliance issues, has access to a public water supply main adjacent to their property, and all they need is the connection fee. This is a great way to help, again, these small systems with compliance issues. These grants also provide necessary information to facilitate construction of required capital improvements for the consolidation to move forward. So again, in the study, when it's starting to come up with cost estimates for the project and identify capital improvements, that helps set these projects up to secure funding. I've mentioned this multiple times, but the system being consolidated typically need extensive upgrades and to be brought to the standards of the new owner. A lot of these systems that are being consolidated, they're small, they're owned by volunteer boards, homeowners associations. They've not maintained their infrastructure. They've deferred a lot of necessary infrastructure improvements. So there is a huge cost sometimes to bring these systems into or upgrade these systems to the standards. So it's real important when you start looking at consolidation to know the full cost of what it will take to consolidate the system. We fund a lot of consolidation construction projects through our construction loan program since 2014. Over 50% of our construction loans we've issued for consolidation projects did have a consolidation feasibility study grant. So we see a huge value again in these grants, helping prepare the systems for the doing the actual consolidation and infrastructure improvements. Through our construction loan program, we offer 50% principal forgiveness on loans for consolidation projects, and we consider the consolidation eligible for this funding up to 5 years after the change of ownership occurs. And the majority of the consolidation projects we funded, the system being consolidated is responsible for the project costs. So very important to try to make these projects as cost effective and feasible as possible. I'll now go over a few examples of projects we funded. First one is City of Oroville and Eastlake consolidation. Oroville is up near the Canadian border. Eastlake is a small, privately HOA owned and operated system, 28 residential connections, and they had a nitrate exceedance in their well. We funded a feasibility study in 2016 to develop cost for the water main extension to intertie with Oroville and then to bring Eastlake's distribution system up to the standards for City of Oroville. The study indicated consolidation was the best option. The study did look at other alternatives such as drilling a new well or installing treatment. And the study did show consolidation was in the best interest of Eastlake's for them to address the nitrate exceedance. And one side note, when you are looking at cost estimates, so important to look at the 20-year life cycle. Consolidation could be the most capital cost, but when you look at O&M over 20 years, it can become quickly the most cost-effective option. So the project cost, $919,000. It involved 3,000 feet of water main extension to intertie the systems, along with some other improvements to Eastlake's distribution system. We did fund this project with state funding that we had. It's all grant funded and it's going to construction this year. I do want to note, if this project had received a conventional DWSRF loan, all loan, the repayment for those 28 connections over a 20-year period would have been $160 a month. So that is just not sustainable for these small systems or anybody. $160 a month per connection is very high. The next example is down in City of Vancouver with the Fourth Plain Church. The church well became coliform positive, and they were looking at how to address this issue. They applied for and received feasibility grant funding for both a design of the water main to extend to the church, and then it helped offset the connection fees. So in short order, the church was able to connect to City of Vancouver with this funding. The last example is City of Richland and Lorraine J consolidation. Lorraine J has 120 residential connections. It had a nitrate exceedance in its well. City of Richland applied for and received the feasibility grant in 2016 to look at options and what it would take to connect Lorraine J to its system. The feasibility study looked at what the cost would be to connect the systems, and this was quite a long water main extension needed to connect the system, 9,000 feet, plus improvements to the Lorraine J infrastructure. But both water systems took a look at the cost and other options and decided that this was a good idea to consolidate. And in 2017, City of Richland applied for and received a construction loan from us for $1.8 million with 50% principal forgiveness. And this project is done, and Lorraine J is now a customer and part of City of Richland. Just to summarize the benefits of these grants, it allows interested water systems to study consolidation with little risk. With the grants, again, there's no capital outlay. With the interested water systems that want to look at consolidation, it provides key information to water systems on costs so they can make good decisions on if they should consolidate. And then it really helps prepare these projects for construction funding and avoids delays with negotiating terms of a consolidation. We all need to move our construction loan funding quickly, and you don't want to spend the first 12 months of the project with the two parties negotiating. So these studies help prepare the water systems and get them to a place where they are ready to move forward with the project. Here's my contact information. I thank you for letting me be part of this webinar and happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay. All right, well, thank you everybody for attending. Really good presentations. We have a lot of questions that we can definitely get through today. So as questions are continuing to come in, here are the contact information for Dallas, Carla, and Janet, and also links for the resources that they mentioned within their presentation. And again, as a reminder, we do have these slides for today's webinar presentation in the handouts. So as questions are still coming in, thank you all so very much for shutting that in. So we are gonna start off with a question for Dallas. So Dallas, if the DWSRF has a goal that 15% of funding goes to small systems, if the system is being consolidated, is a smaller system, but the larger system is taking out the loan, can the project still count towards small system goal?
Okay, yep, that is a good question. And I think maybe just to provide some context, I'll just reiterate, I didn't talk about it in my presentation, but yeah, under the DWSRF, states have a goal of providing 15% of their funding to small systems, to assist small systems every year. And so the answer for that would be yes. The larger system is taking out the loan, but this project is still assisting and benefiting a small system. So that could count towards that 15% goal for the state.
Alrighty, thanks, Dallas.
Yeah,
Next
no problem.
question is for Janet. So who makes up the stakeholders that weigh in the consolidation feasibility grants? And also, what is a reasonable time frame for the study?
So the stakeholders, that would be our utilities here in the state that are willing to take on these smaller systems. So those would be our public utility districts, our water districts, cities, and counties. Those are the players that we have here in the state that are willing to take on these small systems. And then good question on time frame, 2 years for these studies, for the funding that we award, and then you have 2 years to complete the study.
Okay, great. Another question for Dallas. Are the set-asides for preliminary engineering report only for potential consolidation projects or for any particular community doing their own project?
That's also a good question. So preliminary engineering reports or your planning and design activities under the set-asides, they're not limited to just consolidation projects. It could be a variety of projects, but I will note that under the DWSRF, we have this rule that what's eligible under the loan fund cannot be funded with the set-asides. So typically, planning and design activities are eligible under the loan fund. The only exception is that they are eligible under both components for small systems. So you'll see under the set-asides, your preliminary engineering reports and planning and design activities under that 2% set-aside, specifically for those small systems. What larger systems typically do, and this also, again, can be for any planning and design, doesn't just have to be for consolidation. They can do a separate planning and design loan, or they will do the planning and design activities and then just kind of roll it up into the larger infrastructure project loan. So I hope that answers that question. But essentially, no, the set-asides, planning and design for small systems is not just limited to consolidation projects.
All right. And this question is for Janet, but also Carla, you can chime in to if you have any other examples that you're familiar with. But what barriers to consolidation do you encounter and how do you get past those? The person wrote in that some of the barriers that they're seeing are wholesalers that are not comfortable with taking on the distribution lines that they did not install. So anything kind of similar to that, any other barriers that you've encountered and how did you get past them?
Right. The biggest barrier is cost. And as I stated, the majority of the projects we have funded, the system being consolidated bears the cost of the project, whatever that might be, the extension of the water main and required infrastructure improvements within that system. And then, yes, particularly with cities, they have a tough time taking over these small systems, and a mobile home park's a great example, where they want nothing to do with the distribution system that resides behind the master meter. So what typically happens when we have a mobile home park that's part of the project, the funding will be for the main extension and putting in the master meter, and then the mobile home park goes away as a regulated public water supply, but the mobile home park owner maintains ownership, operation, and maintenance of everything behind the meter. But cost is definitely the biggest barrier that we see. And was there another part to that question?
Yeah, and just how do you overcome that challenge or any
right.
words of advice?
Right. Yeah. How do we overcome that? Yeah. Sometimes the cost, that's just the showstopper and you're done. Other times you try to help find funding. And again, our state legislature did provide funding in 2018 and 19 for these projects. That was all grant, and that certainly made these projects cost effective and allowed these projects to move forward. So funding is definitely a barrier when it comes to these projects, and grants make the project go much better.
Okay, and another question for you, Janet. You have a lot of questions for, for your presentation. Are there ways you can measure the effectiveness of the Washington's consolidation feasibility grants?
One of my favorite metrics is since 2014, half of the DWSRF construction loans we've issued for consolidation projects had consolidation grant funding. So that shows that these grants really help get these projects to construction. So that's a metric we like to use. Again, we don't force anybody to proceed with the project based on the recommendations that come out of the feasibility study, but we do see a lot of benefit from these studies because we have eliminated, I think the number was 53 systems to date, and that's an important number for us.
Absolutely, and also, are there any changes to your program that you can potentially forecast?
Changes to further promote consolidations?
Yeah, or are you going to be continuing, the grant study? And if so, are there, potential changes for those studies, or is it still, a well-oiled machine and there's
Sure.
nothing in the near future to change?
Right. I think what would really help, and I think because of COVID, we are going to see a lot of these small systems be in serious financial hardship. A lot of them have had issues with delinquency and customer accounts, that these small systems are really going to be seeking out new ownership. And a lot of our PUDs are getting approached right now by these small systems to be taken over. So we are working with our state legislature for more grant funding to help with these projects and to have more flexible funding that could be accessed year round. I think California has a very good model and would certainly like to mimic part of their strategy to having state dollars available when the system's ready for the consolidation to happen.
Absolutely. And I have one more question for you, Janet. Does is the plan to go back to funding this program through set-asides, or are you going to continue using fees?
I think for now we'll stay with using our fees. We won't rule out going back to set-asides, and we use the 10 of the 15% when we did use set-asides. But we want to make sure this funding is available to our stakeholders, and again, that's our cities, counties, PUDs, and water districts who are frequently getting approached by these small systems to be taken over. They like this grant funding, they want it to be available, and we want to make sure we have a secure source of funding. But as this grows in popularity, we might make other funding sources available again through the set-asides.
All right. And I lied, Janet. I have one more question for you. Did the entities face many challenges with respect to annexation, or was annexation off the table?
So when you're dealing with the city, it becomes an annexation, and those are a little more complicated because then it's water and sewer. We can only fund the water portion. So it becomes more expensive, and the system being consolidated might have to seek other funding sources to cover the cost of connecting to city sewer. So those are very complicated. Usually a local improvement district gets formed. So those take the most time, have the most legal cost, and definitely the most complicated because you are getting into a lot more requirements with the city and to bring the system being consolidated up to standards. But the examples I gave, those were cities. We were able to make those projects happen and put together the funding for the project to move forward and be successful.
That's fantastic. All right, so we are up on the hour. I would like to thank Janet, Carla, and Dallas yet again for presenting on today's webinar. And thank you everyone for attending today. If you have any questions, I know we didn't get to all the questions today, but if you want to follow up, their contact information is available right here and also within the handout. So thank you again, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.